Hey folks, thought I should make a follow up video after I made some very bold statements that the Democratic Alliance does not have a plan. The Democratic Alliance does not have proposals that are actually going to create economic growth. And I must just rephrase some of the things that I said. In that sixth economic plan by the Democratic Alliance, I did state that improving our education as South Africa is good. We need to do that. We definitely in urgent need to improve our educational outcomes. But I said that that is not, it's not an economic growth plan. And then I used an example that if having an excellent education system was an economic growth plan, Zimbabwe, which probably has the best education system in Africa, wouldn't be a failed state. And then I also went to say that corruption also and inefficiencies and all of that, have running an efficient government is not economic growth plan. And I also admitted that we need efficient government, especially on a local government, in terms of service delivery, where the government really meets the people. But that's also not that's not an economic growth plan. You are not going to create jobs, millions of jobs, because you are running a clean government. If that was the case, Cape Town would be creating millions of jobs every year, and it is not. There are millions of people in the Cape Flats and in Cape Town who are unemployed and are unemployable. So, can we just disabuse ourselves of this notion that corruption is the cause of our problems in South Africa? No, it is not. It is not. And then there's the issue of that BE is also the cause of. It's not the cause of lack of economic growth. If it was the case, China wouldn't be the second biggest economy in the world. No one has a larger sort of called BE policy than China. So it's just not true. But I wanted to elaborate further on this point, to say that suppose, for instance, that there was no corruption in South Africa. Would this result in economic growth and a low unemployment rate? The answer is no, it wouldn't. And I want you to hear what I'm saying, and I want you to not hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that corruption is good, and I'm not saying that corruption needs to continue. I'm saying that lack of corruption won't create jobs and it won't grow the economy. Because a lot of you are so obsessed with this corruption topic, you are missing the forest for the trees. And a lot of you, no one can dissuade you of this notion that if it wasn't for ANC corruption, the economy would be growing. No. Even if the ANC was not corrupt, if they were governing with the policy that they have right now, even without corruption, the South African economy would be as bad. Let me make an example. Goodyear plant in the Eastern Cape, which is shutting down after 80 years in South Africa. Do you think that manufacturing plant, which has been manufacturing tires locally for 80 years, is closing down because Jacob Zuma was stealing millions of rands to build his house, or that Brian Molefe was stealing money here and there, or Bheki Cele was also found with his hand in a cookie jar, or that some other ANC person was caught stealing, embezzling tender money? Is that why Goodyear is living? Let me put it. Let me ask it differently. With the current ANC policies, economic policies, if they were not stealing money, would Goodyear not leave the country? Let me take it further as well. ArcelorMittal in Newcastle, closing down 5,000 plus or minus people losing their jobs. If the ANC was not corrupt, would they not be closing down their plant? Will they continue to operate because the ANC is not corrupt? If we say there is no corruption at all. Also, is the main issue that is facing ArcelorMittal is that they can't operate because of the BE requirements of employment in South Africa. Is this why they are closing? Because the BE requirements that they must prefer black or people of color as employees. Is this the reason why these companies are closing? Is this why they are leaving? No, that is not the reason. It's not the reason. The reason why they are leaving is that they are not making money. And why are they not making money? They are not making money because Asian nations have been dumping steel in South Africa for the past 20 years. And the South African government has not been doing anything about that. BEE has nothing to do with that. And ANC corruption has nothing to do with that. This has to be said because a lot of you are obsessed with this race issue of BE and you are obsessed with this corruption issue of the ANC. You're missing the forest for the trees. I know that's the case because all of these companies, they are required to hand over 51% of their ownership when they go to China, but they do it willingly because they make so much money in China. The real question really when it comes to companies, when they go to any country, anywhere in the world, is the question, are we going to make money? Are we going to make money? And can we expect a stable environment where we know what to expect in terms of compliances and laws and other things without too much changes and instability? But at the end of the day, can we make money, profit? Like, can we make profit? And companies are leaving South Africa because they are just not making money. You can go back to Goodyear as well. Goodyear is leaving because China, India, Korea, Vietnam, Japan are dumping cheap imports in South Africa of tires. They've been dumping them for the past 20 years, and the government is not doing anything about that. That, ladies and gentlemen, is economic policy and industrial policy. It is not BEE. It is not corruption. Those are two separate things. So can you just stop it? Stop it with this obsession with race and corruption. Let's talk about the things that matter. Industrial policy and economic policy. Those are the things that matter. Not your obsession with hatred of affirmative action. We can discuss your issues, affirmative action and BE and whatever, another day. But when it comes to this, the primary issue here is not BE, it's not affirmative action, it's not preference of previously marginalized groups in employment. The problem is that international companies, they can't make money. They can't make money. Let me even take it further and to discuss the issue of ArcelorMittal, comparing it to what's happening in like Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, here in the United States. One of the main issues that President Trump is fighting the Chinese with is their dumping of steel and aluminum in the US market. China has been doing that in the United States for the past 40 years and has been slowly but surely killing off the steel and aluminum industry in the United States. And the United States of America does not have any BE, but these steel and aluminum sectors have been dying because American presidents of both parties have been allowing China to destroy their industrial base. Until Donald Trump got into power, and then he said it stops right here, right now. It's not just the issue of steel, it's other issues like pharmaceuticals, electronics, like things like tires, all rubber-based goods, things like that. Donald Trump came in and he said it stops, it ends right here, which is why he has imposed tariffs on a lot of these Chinese goods. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, also, why is Tupperware leaving South Africa? The one of the oldest makers of dishes and household containers. They are leaving South Africa because China has been flooding South Africa with their cheap substitutes. That's why they're leaving. They can't compete. They can't compete. And if you can't compete, then you have to close down. So, so the point that I'm making here is that good economic policy and good industrial policy has nothing to do with your obsession with corruption and with your obsession with BE. Do you think that these leading economies in the world do not have corruption? Like the US, China, India, Germany, South Korea. Do you think they don't have corruption? Of course they have corruption. There's corruption everywhere in the world. But the big difference is that, are you actually doing your job? Are you actually doing your job? Are you passing laws that are helping the people? That's really what makes a big difference. Especially China. China is very, very corrupt. But you'll never hear anything about it because they are a competent government. And the level of the level of corruption in China when it comes to the amounts of money that we're speaking about, it makes the amount of money that is being stolen in South Africa to look like pocket change. But it's not a big issue because they are they have a single focused and intentionality and plan to uplift the Chinese people out of poverty, and that is what they are doing, with or without corruption. And sometimes, in certain respects, corruption becomes a sunk cost of doing business when it comes to government. The main issue is that, are you actually doing their job? There's not a single company that has closed shop in South Africa that is closing shop and leaving because of how much Jacob Zuma was looting the coffers, or how much Malusi Kigaba was looting, or how much any of these folks who were in government before this time were looting government. None of these companies are leaving South Africa because of that. Because even the impact of corruption on them is tangential at best. The big issue that affects them is that once they've made these products and then taken them to market, they are not able to sell them and make money and make profit out of it. And the South African government have been looking at this thing happening for years and they are not doing anything about it. The Chinese destroyed our clothing and textile industry by the early 2000s, and the government did nothing about that. Now the Chinese is actually in the process of destroying our steel and aluminium industry. And steel and aluminium in particular is very important because of how ubiquitous it is in terms of it's in everything. Everything that we use has steel and aluminium. So the impact that it has on creation of jobs in a local economy cannot be quantified. So really when we look at that at the level of saying that at the level of saying, this is why I say that the Democratic Alliance doesn't have plans. It doesn't have any plan. Because their only plan is that we are not corrupt. And we are not corrupt is not going to help us with 33% unemployment rate. It's not. It's not. You need to pass bold laws that are going to first help us stop the bleed of the bleeding of jobs, number one, and number two, you need to pass bold laws that are actually going to incentivize local production so that our economy is productive again. And that might also include tariffs, subsidies, and other non-tariff and non-subsidy supports of local industry. That is what is needed primarily on the side of government. And that issue has nothing to do with corruption. The issue is that is your industrial policy sensible? Is your industrial policy geared towards job creation? That's the main issue. That's the main issue. Yeah, so folks, can any one of you who comment in my videos, please stop saying anything about corruption? I really don't want to hear it. I really don't want to hear it. I'm not thinking about corruption. Corruption is the last thing on my mind, because corruption is the last thing because corruption is not the main issue for me that is causing South Africa to be where it is. Right now as we speak, if the ANC government was not incompetent, they could pass laws that by the end of, say, February or March 2026 would have created more than 100,000 jobs just by passing certain laws. Even if they are continuing to be corrupt, they would have created 100,000 jobs. Right now, by the stroke of the pen, they could prevent Goodyear from leaving the country. They could prevent ArcelorMittal from closing their plant in Newcastle. There's a lot of things that they could prevent from happening by just the stroke of the pen. And none of those things has anything to do with corruption or whether you are corrupt or not corrupt. This just has to do whether you are competent or not. Competency. Competency and corruption are not in the same equation. You can be competent and corrupt. You can be incompetent and corrupt. You can be incompetent and not be corrupt. And you can be competent and not be corrupt. Start conflating these things. Stop conflating these things. Stop conflating these things. Because basically what you mean is that what is needed to create jobs is you just need to be honest. Honesty does not create jobs. Honesty is not on the competence side of things. Honesty goes on the integrity side. Honesty is not creative or innovative. Honesty is not a solutions thing to a problem. That's something else altogether. And also, one of the things that frustrate me about this is that, as I've said several times, that the problem in South Africa is not with the politicians, is that the South African electorate fails to critically analyze things. And so a lot of the chatter that you hear is a discussion of things that don't really matter as much as the things that do matter. It's majoring on minors. We need to start majoring on majors. And as long as you are talking to me about government corruption, and as long as you're talking to me about BE, that tells me that you are not majoring on majors. Because I'm telling you now, if the economy of South Africa was growing by 6 to 10% every year, and doing that for 5 years to 10 years straight, none of you will be saying anything about BE or anything about corruption. If the South African economy was adding 200,000 jobs every year, and the unemployment rate was at 10%, none of you would be saying anything about corruption. None of you would be saying anything about BE. You are concerned about things that don't matter as much as compared to the things that matter the most. It's very frustrating. Cheers. See you on the next one.